Share screen. Hello. Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Okay, can you guys see my screen? Can you guys see my screen? Okay, that's weird. Let me drop the chat here. Can you guys see my screen? Okay. Okay, cool. Okay. All right. So this is what we're going to learn today. Okay. Yesterday we learned about client server architecture. We learned about stateful versus stateless. Okay. Then we understood the REST API. Okay. So today we'll understand more about the REST APIs and how we are going to work with. And I told you that REST APIs are basically, it treats everything as a resource. Okay. We saw an example of something like www.mybook.com/books would be basically this thing. We can go ahead and change this to mylibrary.com books. This would be the API endpoint for books. Okay. Just a recap of what we did yesterday. Then another resource here was mylibrary.com students. That was the API for students. Okay. And we also learned about different types of methods: get, post, put, and delete mostly. We left out something called patch. Okay. All right. So let's talk about like when we talk about a client server architecture, right? The client always requests something to the server and the server gives the response back. Okay. Now there are many ways in which you can carry information in your request. For example, if you're hitting this site www.facebook.com, okay, when you're making a get call on this, you're basically saying that read me everything that is on the facebook.com. So I told you this call here goes and triggers a method which returns an HTML page to you. Okay. Here you just pass this. If you need more information, for example, let's say you want to check the profile of some person, then you would probably pass that information by passing basically something like this, profiles, and then there you would get the profile ID. Okay. What are we doing here? We are basically sending information or sending query to the server so that the server can process our request and gives a response back to us. Okay. In get calls, in get based APIs, these calls are only read only calls. So majority of the information that you send in a get call is going to be on the URL itself. Okay. Which means that if let's say I'm searching for Amazon. Okay. Amazon.com. This will give me everything on Amazon. Let's say I'm trying to look at all the items that I have. Okay. I mean, all the items that there are. Okay. So this will actually show all the items, right? This is the extra piece of information that I passed in my URL, in my get URL, which is going to tell the server that I want to get only this piece of information from you. If I have then given something like this one, then you are basically passing two pieces of information to the server saying, I want to view the items and just one particular, like the item with the ID one. This is what I want to view. So with these two uh, pieces here, you're basically telling the server that process my request and give me back the item number one. Okay. So this is basically passing information in your request. Okay. In get call, in a typical get call, there is basically either this, I mean, there are basically two things. Okay. One is a path variable. One is a query parameter. Okay. These are the two things in a get API call. Okay. For example, let's say I want to show me all the books. Okay. What would be the URL for this? It would be www.mylibrary.com/books. Okay. So because you pass this book, like this keyword called books, you're basically telling the server that I want to see all the books. Okay. This is you passing your information in your request itself. This is your request URL. Okay. Now, if I say that I want to like see only one book here, I would like, for example, show me the book with ID 1. Okay. What will it be at that point? It will be www.mylibrary.com books 1. Okay. What we did here, this thing, this guy here. Okay. This can also be written as okay. This ID is what is known as path variable. Why is it a path variable? Because it is a variable, right? This ID here can be 1 if you're requesting for book ID 1. If you're requesting for book ID 100, it can be 100. So this is a variable thing, right? So this ID is actually called a path variable. And why is it a path variable? Because you're specifying it in the path itself. So this URL is also known as path. Okay. So when I say path variable, this is what basically becomes a path variable. Okay. Now, let's say my
Sir,
yeah,
hello.
yes, Abhishek.
Here also we can write book equal to ID, sir.
Book equals
Book
to
equal sign and ID.
book equals sign
Yeah,
ID.
book
No.
equal
The book equals ID.
one.
To this won't work, right? I'll come to that. Basically, what is books here? Books is the resource, right? It is the resource that I'm looking for. Under that resource, I'm basically saying this ID. Okay. When you say books equals ID, that is like that's a bad way of doing it, because in your you are basically saying that give me all the books, right? So your base API URL should always end with the resource you're looking for. Okay, that is the books. Now, if you want some particular type of book, then whatever comes after this path is what you like, whatever specifics you want will come after this books resources part. This slash, you see, it'll come after that. So there are two things you can do. You can either send a path variable, or you can send a query parameter, or you can send both. Okay. We'll see how it is going to happen. So in this case, I'm just requesting for book ID 1. If I did not have this thing, then it would return me all the books. Okay. Because I have this thing, it will return it. This is a path variable, right? Similarly, if this, like, if in my library, I can also look for a student with ID 1. So what that will be like, if I come here and say, show me the student with ID 1, the value for that would be www.mylibrary.com students 1. So what happens here is, in here, this becomes your path variable. Okay. Sorry. This becomes your ID. Okay, this is a path variable. Similarly, if you notice here, this URL and this URL, they are almost same. The only differences are here, this one and this one, which means this is also a variable, right? Because under the same base API, you are requesting for students. Under the same base API, you're also requesting for books, which means this is also something that can change. So your URL would look something like this: mylibrary.com, okay, resource, and then ID. Understood? So here you basically captured two path variables. Okay, one is your resource, which is either books or students. Another one is your ID. Okay, any confusion here? This
No,
is
sir.
no, right? You understood everything, right? So this was the path variable. Okay, this was path variable. I'm recording, right? Yes. Okay, cool. Okay, let's talk about query parameter. Okay, all right. Before we get into query parameter, let's say this is how our book class looks. Okay, class book. It has a string book name, integer long book ID, and let's say string book author, and let's say category. Just use string here. Category, okay. And then let's say string published on. Okay, so basically this would be your book name, this would be your book ID, this would be your book author, this would be your category of the book, whether self-help or science fiction, these things, and the date on which the book was published. Let's say this is the minimum information you're keeping about a particular book. Now, if somebody wants to query all the books by a particular, I mean, if somebody wants to uniquely identify a book, they would have to pass the book ID. So this ID here would be mapped to this book ID, right? But what if somebody says that I show me all the books which are written by a particular author, right? Then if you write something like this, sorry, let's say my query is show me all the books written by author James. Okay, if this is the query that we have, we cannot write something like this: www.mylibrary.com books James. We cannot write it like this. Can anyone tell me why we cannot write it like this? Just a guess. Anyone?
Sir, there can be multiple authors by name James, so we need to provide ID.
नहीं तो इसमें मतलब this is so in one URL I'm giving this book/1 and दूसरे में हम लोग दे रहे हैं कि James. So how does the application know what is what? Like whether, I mean, the application knows that okay, this is the ID of the book, but how does the application know that James is not the ID and James is the author name? You understood the problem, right?
Yes, sir.
So basically, from your browser does not know if this is the ID or this is the ID, because someone can have an ID like ABC123, right? This could be a valid book ID, right? Or some book ID can be 123, and everything goes out as a string. The entire URL goes out as a string. So when you write something like this, your system doesn't really know whether you're looking for book by an author or book by an ID. So usually the general best practice is if you have something after this thing, okay, it should always be the ID. This is what the general practice is, that if you have something like this in the path variable, it should always be ID. Now, if you want something more, like let's say you want to filter books by something, right? Let's say you want to get all the books by a particular author or particular category. What you would do is, instead of that, you would basically add this thing, this question mark sign. This question mark sign basically starts a query. It's like a, I mean, whatever comes after this, right? This becomes a query that the server has to process and give you that result. So for example, I want all the book author, I mean, I want all the books written by a particular book author. So I would say book author equals James. I think this is what Abhishek was saying. Okay. This part is going to go out as a query. This will go out as a key value pair. Okay. Then let's say you're saying that, okay, give me all the books. Let me rewrite this thing. Okay. Okay. Show me all the engineering books written by author James. Okay. Can anyone tell me what that URL would look like? It would look like this. And okay, double and then you would say what is the variable? Category equals engineering. Okay, like that, like this, you can actually with the help of multiple and-ends, you can specify your condition here. And like this, you can basically specify whatever you want. This part, the part that starts after this, is actually called query. These are called query parameter. A real life example. Let's go to Google. Okay, let's search for something. I don't know. Okay, if you see here, if you copy this part here, right? Forget about this entire thing. Just look at this. There is this thing. Okay, they're saying under the search, this is the queue. Okay, so they're basically taking this entire whatever you searched as a text. Okay, and then they're basically specifying this entire text as the parameter of queue. In their server, the queue is actually known as the query, and then they will basically extract this query from there, and you know, they'll show you the result. Okay, so this is what a query parameter basically is. These are the query parameters. Okay, you do it with this. So we have seen path variables and we have seen query parameters. How do we use both? In a scenario, let's say you are a company that, let's say you are Book My Show. Okay, you're a Book My Show. Okay, you want to know, show me all the movies show me all the horror movies in Bangalore. Okay, this is your query. You would write it like this: bookmyshow.com. Okay, and let's say so you would have to probably first find out which city you are in, right? So you would say cities. Okay, then let's say Bangalore has a city ID of 003. Okay, then okay, you're going to say this movies, and then you would say let me explain what happened here. Okay, one by one. Okay, this part will show you all cities BMS is operating in. Okay, then this, if 003 is the ID for Bangalore, let's say, will show you all the, like, will show you information about the city with ID 003, which is Bangalore. Okay, then this part, this will show you all the movies playing in city Bangalore. Okay, then this particular thing will show you all horror movies playing in. Is this clear? Does anyone have
Yes,
any
sir.
this is clear, right? So you will never be given a statement, any of these things like that. Okay, you're in any problem statement when you're designing an API, they will always ask you something like this: show me all the horror movies playing in the Bangalore. So there you have to think. Okay, now if you see here, my choice was that in the bookmyshows.com, I have decided the city first, then I have decided the movies. I cannot, I could I have written something like this? Show.com. I could have written something like this: movies 003 city. I mean, this wouldn't have made any sense, right? Because you are going to, how do you approach, like when you open the Book My Show app, it basically says select your city first and then you can book, which means cities need to be called first, then inside that city, what is it that you want movies. So then this will show you the movies, and then if you want a specific kind of movie, you could do this. Let's say I want to say that all the horror movies released in the year, released year is, let's say, 2021, then this would be your URL query parameter. Okay, you would not write it like this. You would have to, in this case, when you're designing an API, you would have to think practically as to what comes first. Is it the city that comes first, or is it the movie that comes first? If you have a movie, you cannot say that, okay, find me all the cities that are playing this movie. Understood what I said? So when you're designing API, you have to basically be careful about how, like, you have to come up with a reason as to why you are naming your path like this. Okay, so what we saw here in this particular example is we have used path variables. Okay, let's see. We did this: bookmyshow.com city, okay, then city ID, then element, okay, and then this was your query param. All right, so this is an example of using both path variable plus query params. One second, params. Okay, this is how you write all of these things. Okay, any questions on this? So
No, sir.
all of these, right? All of these are just URLs. A get call, if you do a get call on this particular API, right? With this get call, you're telling the server a couple of things. You're telling the server, hey, I want something from city ID 003. What is that? I want movies. Okay. In that movies, I want a genre of horror and released year of 2021. So when the server is processing this entire URL, it will extract what it needs. Okay, it will extract the city, it will extract the city ID, it will extract the element here, which is movie in our case, then it will extract the query parameters, then it will process. Okay, this is for the get calls. Okay, now let's look at post call. Okay, post calls, they never have query params. Okay, what they have in turn is request body. This is where your XML versus JSON comes in. Okay, post calls, but they can have path variable. Okay, right? So let's take an example of post calls. Okay, let's say I have a problem statement. Okay, before we get into this thing, let's talk about this. This is my class. Okay, this is my typical Java class, or if you're in like, this is how a class looks in any programming language. Okay, if you want to convert this into something that the web understands, right? When I say web, I mean your browser or some other device or a web server. Okay, if you want to convert your class into something that the web understands, you have many options, of which there are two popular options. You can either use XML or you can use JSON. Okay, I will just show you how you can convert a class, like when you convert a class to an XML, how it looks, and then I'll show you how it looks in JSON, and then we'll not talk about XML anymore because we're not going to teach XML. We'll just teach the JSON. Okay, for example, if I want to convert this class into an XML request body, I will have something like this: book. Okay, then what is the first this thing here? It is book name. I'll say book name. uh, okay, it can be anything. Okay, this here would be book ID. Okay, then the next thing would be book author. Okay, you get the gist, right? I'm not going to write the whole thing. Okay. You get the gist. So basically for every variable you would write it like this. For JSON, what would happen is you would simply write it like this. I think I showed this to you before as well. With comma, you separate every field. Okay, then you say okay, then you say category. Okay, and then you say published on. Okay, something like this. This is how a book structure would look basically. So if you have a book of the name SFSF7 like that, this is how the JSON body would look. Okay, how does a nested object look? Okay, for example, let's say I do something like this. In my book object, I'm going to modify this, and I'm going to say, let's say, instead of having this thing, okay, I'm going to have an object called author. Okay, and in this I'll have another class called author. Okay, here it'll just be string author name. Okay, and let's say it'll be string author age or something like that. Okay, age or something like that, some random value like this. Okay, so you can see here that this class is actually nested inside this particular class, right? So how do you write nested JSON? You would remove this thing. Okay, here you would write author. Why am I giving it as author? Because in here the variable name is author. Okay, that's why I gave the author here. Then here this becomes another sub JSON, and then you would basically say author name, okay, and then you would say age, something like this. This is how you write a nested JSON. Okay, now if you have to write an array of JSON, okay, like where you have to pass a JSON object, but then that's like, for example, let's say you're saying that show me all the books, okay. So let's say you copy this. Okay, you have 3 such books. Basically, an array of JSON would start with this third bracket. Okay, you would basically copy this entire thing. It is just like an array. Okay, but it's this is how it looks. Okay, it starts with the third bracket. Within that, each of these elements, like if I just move it here a little bit. Okay, if I minimize this, you see that the JSON actually starts with a third bracket here, and then you have your individual JSON here. Each of these JSONs are separated by them by a comma, and then this becomes an array of JSON. Is the JSON structure understood? Does anyone have any questions or confusion about this? Cool. Okay. So this is what a JSON body looks like. Now, let's say I want to add a book. Okay. Let me increase the font. Let's say I want to add a book, right? Which book I want to add? I want to add Jurassic Park. All right. Who was the author? I don't know, like. Okay. What was the released year? Let's say 1991 or whenever it was. When was it? 1999? I don't know. Okay. Published on category, let's say. I mean, I know I'm talking about a movie here, but let's just say, never mind. Let's just say that you add a movie, okay? And this is what your movie structure looks like. Name, producer, let's say that it can be a list of genres. Like one movie can be thriller, action, all those things, right? Genres, okay? Or instead of taking the array, we'll use a list of. Okay, and let's say we use a double value for rating. Okay, this is how we want to do it. So now I want to add the movie, this thing, Jurassic Park, producer is Steven Spielberg, released on 1999. This here would go out like this. Let's say you would say horror, and then thriller, basically all that stuff. Okay, and blah blah, something like sci-fi. Okay, something like this, and then you would be giving your rating here. So the rating, let's say, would go out as 3 point, I mean, out of 10, let's say 9.5 or something like this. Okay, if you have a, if you want to save this thing to a URL, okay, let's say we're using IMDb URL. So firstly, let's decide what the path will look like. The path, can anyone tell me what the path will look like? mdb.com. Can anyone tell me what the path would look like for movies? I just want to add a movie. Am I audible to anyone?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So can,
City.
what would be the path? If I am, you know, IMDb, right? IMDb is where you can find movies and basically this thing, man. Like, I don't know if you guys are familiar with IMDb. This is an IMDb. You can search by movie, ad, and all those things, right? So in an IMDb, if I want to add my movie, if I was designing IMDb movies, then movies would be a resource, right? So I would just have something like this. Path would be movies. All right. I would make a post call to this. Okay. Right. Now, what is the request body I'll pass here? Okay, request body would look like this. Name, okay, then producer, okay, let's say released on, okay, then genres, here you will be writing it like this, okay, just like a typical array. So you would write horror, okay, this is how your request body would look like. Then another comma, this would be rating. So you're going to give 9.5. When you send this request, okay, to a post, I mean, when you send a post request with this request body to IMDb movies, this particular website, your server would return you an object like this as a response, okay. It can return anything. It can return successful acknowledgement or something, but the additional field that the server will inject in here is this, okay. Where do you get this ID from? You get this from the database or from the server. The server basically creates it for you and then it gives it back, information back, and it also passes the ID to you, okay. If you see here, I was
Yes.
huh.
If a drug-based work item has a maximum recurrence of 3 and 2 have already been
Yeah.
Triggered in
There's some
the
noise
previous
coming from
draft
somewhere.
version, in the
Someone is
previous
talking.
active version of
Yeah,
program,
hello,
then
sir.
in the
I'm
new
trying
active
to
version of
talk
program
actually.
Drop off, sure, fine, no issues.
No, sir. Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, you told regarding this ID, right?
Huh.
This one, we are getting it in the response body or in the request body only we are passing it.
No, you cannot. I mean, if you're creating a new movie, you don't know what the ID would be, right? The ID is something that the server gives you. What is the meaning of this ID? Basically, in the response body, the server says, hey, I have saved your movie details. If you ever need to uniquely identify this ID, I mean, uniquely identify this movie, here's the ID with which you can uniquely identify. Does that make sense? Vishwesh?
Yes, sir. Got it.
Got it, right? Cool. That's the whole purpose of ID. Many enterprise applications, they actually have something like this. Okay, this is generated by the client. Okay, the client generates it, something like CLI, or I don't know, like something like UUID 1 2 3 4, right? This is different though. This is the server telling you that attach a request ID to your request, so I know which request you're talking about. For let me give you an example. Okay, let's say you have gone to the bank to fetch money. Okay, right now the server is down in the bank, so somebody out there is waiting and saying, why don't you take a token and you know, just we'll call you back when, or if you ever need to know the status of your retrieval or money withdrawal or something, we'll let you know on that. Okay, so what you do is you write a request there on that request you say that my request is 1 2 3 4. So tomorrow when you go to the bank and say, hey, can you tell me what happened to my request, they'll tell you, what was your request ID? If you give them this request ID, they'll be able to find out, okay, your cash withdrawal got declined, or okay, your cash withdrawal is successful, here, take your cash. Did you understand the concept of this request ID here? Many enterprise applications do this thing so that they can uniquely identify this thing. In response to something like this, the server would send you something like this. What is this? This is the server telling you that I have acknowledged your request, and if you ever need to in the future, if you ever need to see what happened with your request, you can always send me this ID and I'll look it up for you. Okay, but that is different. Okay, that is different, and this ID is different. Okay, this ID is different. What is this ID? This ID is, you basically told your server that I am adding a book, I am adding a movie here, and the server said, okay, your movie has been added, but please know that if you ever need to find out information about this movie, just give me this ID. Done. Okay, so remember that the other day I was saying that the post call is not idempotent, which means that if you repeat the same request again and again, it is going to create the same record twice or as many times as you send the request, which means that the same information will be stored, but the ID will be different. Then again you send, it'll be 125. Again you send, it'll be 6. The body, the actual movie here, the information about the movie will be same, but just that server will treat this incoming request as a new resource. Okay, that's why you have to be careful when you are ideally inserting a movie, like when you're saving any sort of information in the database, you basically try to figure out whether the information coming from the client is duplicate or not. Okay, as we go into the database part, we'll see how we can eliminate the duplication. Okay, but for now, this is how it basically looks. If you send a request body like this, this is the response body that you will get. Okay, now let's say you have another requirement where you say add a movie in Bangalore city. Okay, how is this going to look? The request body will look just the same. Only difference here would be your URL. You would say www.imdb .com/cities/003/movies, and then this request and response body. Do you understand the difference between this and that? Let me just decrease the font. The difference between this and this. Any questions about these two? So post requests also can use path variables. Okay. Get request can also use path. In fact, path variable is and can be used by all the API calls that we have discussed so far. Okay. Just that the get request will never have a request body. Post request will never have a query parameter. Post request cannot have something like this. Like if somebody is writing something like that in a post request, this part will be ignored. Server will not pick up this part. It will not recognize this part. Okay. So that's basically for the post calls. Okay. Let's talk about put. All right. The update part. Let's say I made a mistake here. I'm saying that I want to change the released on for Jurassic Park from 1991 to 1999. Okay, because the original movie I have given it as 1999, but at the time of persisting I've written 1991. So I want to change this information. Okay, how do I do this thing? I will place a put call on this imdb.com movies. Okay, right now I'm just thinking that I don't have any cities here, so that's why I'm typing this movies. Okay, so here what I'm doing is I'm saying movies. Now you are trying to update information about a movie, right? So your server needs to know which movie you're trying to access, because update is what? Update, if you think about it, your update is basically read plus write, isn't it? If you're trying to update something, you have to read that record first, right? And then you can write that whatever new value you have. So update is always read and write. So for this read part, you need to give the server something with which the server can uniquely identify that. Okay. Server in your response has already given you this particular thing. Okay. Server has already given you this ID. So you're saying that, hey server, I have an update request for movie with number this. Oops. What is the movie number? 00123. Okay. When you send a put request at this URL or at this API endpoint to your server, server knows that, okay, there is an incoming update request about this particular thing. Okay. Then what you do is your request body would look just like this. Okay. The only difference is here you will do 1999. Okay. In response to that, the server would basically send you a response like this. Okay. You can see that server does not change the ID, which means that it does not treat it as a new resource. Rather, it treats it as an existing resource. Okay. This is where we use the put call. Now, if you see here, I tried updating just the year of released on, but according to put, I had to send the entire request body. Okay, so there is a concept of complete update versus partial update. Okay, for example, if you have your Aadhaar card, let's take your Aadhaar card for example, right? In the Aadhaar card, you can actually update everything. You can update your name, you can update your address, you can update your fingerprint, you can update your eye scanning, you can update your photo, you can update everything there. Okay. So when you usually go for an Aadhaar updation, they give you a form, and that form has all the, like, it has all the fields mentioned, like what is it that you're trying to update. In one shot you can update all of them. Okay, so imagine you have gone to your Aadhaar enrollment center and you say that give me a form and I'll update everything. And what you do is you pick all the fields and you basically specify all the information there, your name, age, you don't specify your age, date of birth, all of those things you specify there. And then you tell UIDI that here you go ahead and update my details. Okay, UIDI does not do anything. It doesn't do any, it does validation on your input, but basically it replaces whatever it receives. Whatever it had before gets completely replaced by whatever you have passed here. Okay, this is called complete update. This mechanism is known as complete update. And put basically, theoretically, put is meant for complete updates. Okay, so in a put API, the server expects you to send the complete body, even though you're trying to just change your name or just a field, like how I just tried to change the released on here. I am required to send the complete body. Okay, what it will do is the server will take this. For this ID, it will basically replace all the values here. Okay, even though the change was just for one particular field. So the REST API guys, they developed that, they realized that this is a problem, right? If you're just trying to, this is fine. Like for example, this particular in this particular scenario, the request body is really small, and this is fine. What if you have a request body with 100 fields, and then that is an array of such JSONs? Let's say you have 10 JSONs, each JSON has 100 fields. It becomes a huge number, right? You cannot inject that many things. You cannot send all that data in one go, right? So they came up with the concept of partial update. Okay, this is where your patch comes in. Remember I told you that I would talk about the patch later. This is where your patch comes in. Patch APIs are meant for partial updates. Okay, so the request for patch, the request URL, what is the request URL for this? The request URL would be like this: www imdb.com/movies/00123. Okay, the request URL would look just the same. What about the request body? The request body would look different. Okay, the request body would look something like this. Okay, when you send a request like this, the response body could be anything. It could be just a simple success. It could be something like this: status success. It could either be this, or ideally the server would send you the complete body. So server would send you something like this. Okay, that's it. What your response is, you can decide how you want the response to be. You can either send a single text saying, okay, this is successful, or you can send the entire updated body. Okay, but did you understand the difference between this and this? In a put request body, you basically replace the entire entry in your database. In a patch request, you only send the field that you need to update. That's it. Okay, any questions on this so far?
No, sir.
Cool. We'll take a 5 minutes break and then we'll come back and discuss the next things. Okay. put patch get post. Okay. All right. So the last method here that we have is basically delete. Okay. The delete API, as I told you, it only takes path variable. Okay. Okay. Which means that, let's say you have this thing, delete movie 00123. So for that, you would basically place a delete call on this API, www.imdb.com. Okay, and then yeah, you would just say movies, and then you'd say 00123. Okay, let's say delete all movies from a city. Okay, in that case, you would basically do a delete call on www.imdb.com cities 003 from a city, let's call it from a city 003. Okay, this. So in this case, you're not passing the particular, like if you're deleting just one single entry, you would pass the ID of it. If you're deleting, if you're doing mass delete, you'd basically place a delete call on this, and ideally this should delete all the movies there is. Okay, that's the delete API. Any questions so far, guys? We have gone through the delete API, we've gone through JSON, put, patch, get. Cool. All right, so let's go back to the top and see what we are left with. Okay. Oh yeah, we understood the query parameters. Okay, we understood the request body using this thing. These are the three things that we're going to look at: request header, and then we'll see mock API and all these things. Okay. So what is a request header? Okay. So in order to explain the concept of headers, let me give you a scenario. Okay. Okay. Imagine that you have a Spring Boot application that randomly shows you a welcome message. Okay. Server that shows random welcoming message. Okay. Imagine that you have a server like this. Okay. Every time you hit the server, you basically get a welcoming message. Okay. Now, server also allows language specific welcome message. Okay. What does that mean? That you can get a welcome message in English if you want. Okay. If you want it in Hindi, you can do that. If you want it in Bengali, you can do that. If you want it in Kannada, you can do that. Okay. If you want it in French, you can do that. Okay. Things like this, right? So there are many ways of basically doing this. You can write something like this: www.mywelcomeserver.com. Okay, messages. Okay, let's say that if you do a get call on this thing, messages, and just say random. Okay, and what you can do is you can pass this en here, and so basically the server will say that, okay, this is a they want the messages in en. Okay, you could pass, let's say Hindi here. I don't know the code for Hindi, but let's say Hindi here, it'll pass the messages from this. Let's say you want it in French, you pass it like this. You can either do it like this, okay, or you can use something called header. So what exactly is a header? So in any request, there are two parts. Any HTTP request it is made up of two things, okay? HTTP request body plus headers. Whenever we talk about JSON or XML, we talk about request body. What we saw in those examples was basically request body. So what exactly is request headers? Okay, headers are basically metadata about your request. Okay, what exactly is the definition of headers? Headers are basically metadata about your request. Okay, they basically specify how you want your response to be. Okay, something like this. Think of it like this. I want a random message. Okay, random welcoming message. If I want, like, I may or may not specify the language I want. Okay, so if I don't specify my language, let's say by default a random welcome message in English will come, right? But I do have the option of specifying a language, right? So if you see here, message is what I'm going to get, right? The end resource is basically a message, and it's just a random. So I've given this path as random. Message is what I'm going to get at the end of the day, right? This has no message ID, nothing whatsoever, because I'm not creating anything. I'm just saying, give me a message, right? Now, you want to pass some additional information about the response. You're saying that I want a response from you, but I want the response to be like this. Okay, so you can either pass it in the URL itself, or you can pass it in your headers. Okay, so this specification, the fact that you're saying that send me the message in Hindi or send me the message in English, it basically is a metadata about your request. Okay, did you want, there's a bit of concept here. So if you're not familiar with the concept, I mean, if you don't understand the concept, just let me know, I'll explain again. But basically headers are metadata about your request data. Okay, they basically specify how your request is going to be processed. Okay, so is this clear, or does anyone like, is anyone there who's not?
Sir, header.
You want me to explain the headers again?
Yes, sir.
So I'll give you the same example. Okay, there is a server that generates messages randomly. Okay, so you say that I want the generated message to be in English. Okay, or you say that I want the generated message in Hindi, or you say that I want the generated messages to be in both English and Hindi. Okay, so what exactly are these requirements? These requirements are basically about how you want your request, I mean, how you want your response to be, or how you're basically passing additional information about your request. Okay, you're saying that process this request, but make sure that you take these pieces of information into consideration when you're processing my request. So you're telling them, hey, this is my actual request, but these are the things that you need to process my request. Okay, that whatever thing is required in order for you to process the request cannot go inside the request, right? Like, for example, how do I say this thing? Let's say you're let me think of an example which will be easy for you guys. Okay, let's say that you are in a bank. Okay, you go to a bank, and basically you're talking to a bank's API. I mean, you're talking to a bank online. Okay, the bank says that, hey, you can log in, you can withdraw money, you can deposit money, you can do a ton of other things, you can check your balance and everything. But every time you do any of these things other than login, let's say you want to view your balance or you want to deposit some money into your account, I need a specific information from you before I can process that. Okay, this is what the bank tells you. Bank tells you that I can deposit your money, I can show you your available balance, but before I do that, I need something else along with the request. Okay, so what exactly is the server specifying? The server is saying that send me your request, but also send me some additional information which I need to process this request. In a real life scenario, the when you log into a bank server, the bank will generate a token and they will give the token to you. And they'll say that every time you want to come and use some service other than login or log out, okay, give me this token. I will check the token and then I will process your request. Okay. Did you understand this difference? That there is a request here, and then there is something else which the request needs to be processed. So what the request needs to be processed cannot be the request itself, right? It's a meta of the request. Did you understand? Is that point clear? If you're trying to add a book, okay, let's say you're trying to add a book in the library, the the system wants to know who is it that's adding the book, right? So your request cannot have the I mean, your request can have that information, who it is that's trying to book. But think about this. What is your request saying? Your request is saying that add this book into the system, right? But the system is saying, I need to know who you are before I can add you this book. That information should not go into your request body, right? Because it is not about the book. It is something that your system needs before it processes your book request. That meta, this sort of information is called a meta information. This meta information we pass in request headers. Is this clear? Like, let's say in a library system, I am authorized to add a book, but you're not. Okay, so you go and you make a post call to your book API. Okay, the book API says, who are you? You say that I'm Abhishek. It says that I cannot authorize you to add this book because you are not recognized by the system. But then I go and I say, hey, take this book and add it to the system, but here's also the extra information that you need. That extra information is basically my authentication. That extra information does not need to go in the post request body. It can go somewhere else. Because that extra information is the meta about the request. That meta can go inside something called request headers. Is that understood? The two distinctions between headers and request body. Abhishek? I cannot hear Abhishek. Maybe you can
Clear,
type.
sir.
Okay, clear, right? Cool. So any HTTP request is always composed of two things: HTTP request body and HTTP request headers. Request body is the resource itself. I'm trying to add a book, so this will have the information about the book. But if there is some extra information that I need, like who it is that I'm trying to add the book, or what is the, let's say, what is the shelf number in which the book will be added, that can go inside the request headers part. Okay, so there are few so how do I say this thing? In an HTTP request headers, there are some predefined headers, and there are some custom headers that you can define. Okay. Let's take a look at the predefined headers. Okay. Okay. So some of the headers that we use, look at this. So if you are sending some information to your server about who you are, you're going to use this keyword called authorization. Okay, this authorization is a reserved keyword. It's like how if, else, all these keywords are reserved in Java, right? In web application, these are the reserved keywords. If you are identifying yourself, like if you're saying that, hey, this is who I am, who's trying to add that book, you would basically pass a value to this. Okay, then caching you can ignore for now. Let's say that I'll show you something which is very frequently used. Okay, look at this. Okay, there's something called content type. Okay, what is the content type? In using the content type, this is a kind of header which basically tells the server what, like, it basically tells the server how the data is. Okay, content type can have different values. Okay, I'll tell you in a while what those different values are, but just let me just see if they have all those thing values here. No, they don't have. Okay, look at this. Okay, so if you are, let's say, if your client is an application, Android app or iOS app, and your server is an application, that is your Spring Boot server or Node.js server, right? And you are sending an you're sending a request which is going to be consumed, which is being sent from an application to another application. Okay, then the first thing is application. Okay, content type is application. Okay, which means that this is an application to application communication. Okay, so this is the application part. Then the next thing is type of the content. Okay, the things that we most often deal with are application JSON, because if we are sending our data in JSON format, then we would have to say application JSON. Okay, if we want to send our data in XML format, we would have to basically specify the content type as XML. If we are sending a form, right? We were talking about form yesterday, right? In HTTP HTML form. When you send that HTML form, if you ever check, you will see that they have X www form URL encoded. These are the reserved keywords. Okay, this application basically says that this is coming from an application to another application, and this is the type, like this is how my data is. And then you have something called, I think, so if you're sending some audio, then it would be like this. If you're sending some image, then it will be like this. Multipart is when you're uploading some huge file, like you're uploading a movie or something, you are uploading the movie part by part. In that case, we are going to use multipart here. Text. Okay, so like if you guys, I mean, many of you guys have worked in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. You must have seen this thing like text CSS, text CSV, text HTML. Okay, so when when you're basically, when it's an HTML file or it's a web page, when you're basically sending an HTML page itself to the server, then you basically say that it is of text type. Okay, but it is written in HTML. So the server knows that, okay, because this is HTML, I'm not going to parse it as a JSON. Because it is HTML, I'm not going to parse it as an XML. Okay, I'm going to only parse it as this thing. If you want to send a plain string, okay, to this to the server, you would say that it's a text file, but it is of plain, which means the server, when it reads this plain part, it will not try to read it as an HTML or as an XML or as a JSON or anything else. Okay, is this clear? This is the content type which we are going to use most often. Okay, is this clear? I'll repeat again. Okay, basically when like two applications are talking, right? One application like an Android app or iOS is sending the request to another application, and it is like meant for application consumption. You would basically precede your content type. The value for content type would be application, and then what is the type of the data, like how exactly is the data going to be parsed. If you send XML, the server will recognize, okay, I need to treat it as an XML, which means that the server, whatever, like let's say you send this, I mean, if you send this class's information to the server, right? The server will basically be able to parse it like this. Okay, if you send it like this, the server will recognize, okay, this is how my request looks. I'm going to treat this as a parent element, treat this as a child element, and if you have nested element, then it will be treated like this. Okay, if you send JSON, okay, then when you send this particular request, the server will realize, okay, this is a particular object. This is a nested object. This is how I'm going to treat each of them. Okay, so basically by setting the content type, you're telling the server how to understand your request. Okay, what is the format of your request? Think of it like this: we have doc files, we have docx files, we have xml files, we have xml, ns, and all those things files, right? So if I send a file to someone, okay, and I specify the dot doc file at the end of it, the system will understand that it is something that needs to be opened on a Word document. If I create a file and end it with dot xl, the system understands that, okay, it is something that I have to open with Excel sheet. Similarly, when you specify this extension there as content type, the server understands, okay, when I'm reading the request, this is how I'm going to read it. Okay. Any questions on this? Okay. Vishwish, you have a question?
No, sir, no questions.
Okay, cool. So we saw, what are the headers we saw? Okay. We saw in the predefined headers, we saw authorization. This is something we'll work very heavily with when we get into the Spring security part. Okay. Otherwise, most of the time you will be using this content type. Okay. Then I think there is something called accepted type, or something like this. Hang on, HTTP header. Accept. Okay. This is another important header, request header, which basically says what is the type that you are going to accept. Okay. Accept. So there are two things that are happening here. Okay. We have basically two things to deal with. Okay. We are saying content type, and then we are saying accept. Okay. Content type basically means, like, whatever request you're sending, how you how the server is going to parse that request, or if you're sending if you're sending some data in it, how is the data going to be opened? Take the example of Excel and Word document. So you basically specify whether it's a doc file or Excel file. Similarly, you specify whether it's a JSON file or XML file, right? Accept means what it is that you are going to accept. Okay. If you specify that I accept only JSON, you say they have the same value though. If you say this thing, application JSON, this means that if somebody sends you a response in this format, you have every right to reject it. If somebody sends you a request in this format, you will not recognize it. You will recognize it only if somebody sends it to you in this particular format. Okay. Let's say you want to accept both JSON and XML. You would say application, with a comma, you would separate it, and you would say XML. Okay. What that means is that I am now allowed to understand this as well as this. Okay. This is the accept header basically says what is it that I understand. If like, let's say you are willing to accept only these two things, but somebody sends you a plain text, something like, hey, okay, you have every right to reject it because you have clearly specified that I don't accept anything other than these two. But if you do want to accept it, you can simply say text plain. Okay. It's a comma separated array value. Okay. The more number of things you add, the more number of things you can accept and parse. If you accept all kinds of requests, the value for that is star. Okay. Similarly, if your content type, I think content type is going to be one thing. Like, you cannot have a request where you will have XML and JSON. You cannot have that. So content type will always have a proper value. It will either be application JSON, or it will be application XML, or it will be text HTML, or it will be text plain. Okay. But it can never be something like this. It can never be something like this because your content is of one particular format. Okay. So accept is one important header that we'll look at. And as we start working with it, right, we'll see more and more different types of headers that will be introduced. Okay. These are the headers that I can think of at this point. And whenever we Like when we are building actual application in Spring, we'll discuss more about the headers. Like there are lots of headers like for authentication, compression, and ton of things. Okay. All right. Any questions so far on this? Okay. If there are no questions on request headers, then let's go ahead and build some mock API. Okay. Let's have a problem statement. All right. Basically, what I want here is I want to build a server with following capabilities. Okay. I want to build a server which will have books and students. The same example that we took here. Okay. You can create, like, add a new book, update an existing book, and then let's say what else can you do? Simple thing. Okay, delete a book. Right. Students, the same thing. Add a student. Okay. Update a student and delete a student. Okay. Find out all books taken by a student. Okay. So let's try to build APIs for that. Okay. So I'll head over to something called Bceptor. Okay. Bceptor is a platform where you can create free mock APIs. What exactly are mock APIs? These are APIs with static values. Okay. Every time you hit the URL, you will get the same value. Okay. The idea behind introducing you to Bceptor is so that you understand, you know, how things usually happen. Okay. So what we're going to do is, one of the requirements is all the APIs must accept JSON request. Okay. You'll be given statements like this. We'll see how to design an API on the basis of this. Okay. So first thing what I'll do is I'll create an endpoint. So for me, the endpoint would be in.geekster.rest. Okay. Create endpoint. Please match the format requested. So what is the format, dude? Subdomain will be created endpoint where you can send a request. What is the format? Let's call it Geekster-rest. Okay, so if you see here, it basically gave me this particular API endpoint. I can just go ahead and hit this right now. You'll see, hey, great to see you. By the way, nothing is configured for this request path. Create a rule and start building mock API. This is an inbuilt message coming from Bceptor. It basically says that you have this thing. You have to create rules. Basically, you have to design your APIs and do this thing. Okay. So this is a tutorial on Bceptor, and once I have created the APIs in Bceptor, I'll show you how we can do it in Postman. Okay. So here you can see, this is where you can see the list of API calls that have come here. Okay. Forget about the favicon.ico call. Every get call from a browser apparently looks for this thing. But you can see that the first get call that came here is slash. Why is it slash? Why is it not entire thing? Because this is the base API. Okay. From this system's point of view, it won't show you the entire URL. It will show you whatever comes after the base API. For example, if I say hello and then hit this thing, okay, you can see now that it says slash hello, which means this represents the base path. Okay. And this represents whatever resource you are going to do. Okay. So for me, I have to create APIs for books and for students. Okay. How do I do that? So you can go here rules enabled. You can go to mocking rules, okay? And if you do not have any rules initially, you will always see this thing, okay? So you can go ahead and create a new rule. Now, what exactly are my requirements here? First thing is add a new book, which means straight off the bat, it is going to be a post, okay? Now here you have request path exactly matches, request path starts with, request path contains, okay? I'll use request path exactly matches. Why? Because any post request coming for books should not have something like books, okay? We're not entertaining that, or we're not saying this, okay? We're saying if you have to create a book, you have to hit a post call to this exact path, okay? So there we say add slash books, okay? That's it. Now, this is response delayed by, it basically introduces artificial response delay, which means, which kind of simulates like, you know, whether it's taking time or not. Anyways, there is one important thing that I missed out, which is HTTP codes, okay? So when your server sends a response, it also sends, so an HTTP response looks like this, okay? HTTP response is basically contains of response body plus response header plus HTTP code, okay? So response headers are just like request headers. Response body is just like request body. What are HTTP codes? These codes basically signal whether your request was successful or not. So there is a list of things you can see here, okay? Informational responses 100 to 199, we're not going to use it, so don't worry about that. Successful response, if your request is successful, then this. Redirection we won't see now. Client error and server error. Let's go each of them, okay? So 200, okay, what basically this means, an HTTP code of 200 basically means that what you tried to do was successfully done. Like there was nothing wrong with the request. The server has successfully processed that request, which is why it sends a okay request. If you're trying to create a new resource, you can either send 200 or you can send 201. 201 basically means that you were trying to create something and it got created. So in our mock API, okay, in here, I'll close this thing. In here, what I'll do is I'll say that return the response 201, okay? Cool. 202 means accepted, okay? So let's say somebody tried to update something, okay? Somebody tried to update a particular field or maybe the entire object. Somebody tried to do a complete updation. There are two things the server can do. Either the server can accept that update or the server can deny that update, okay? So if the server accepts that update, you would send a 202, okay? We'll go back to this 202. Then 204 is basically no content. Let's say I'm trying to search for a particular book ID 0012, but that book does not exist in our system. I'll send them a 204, okay? Then you don't have to worry about these things. Redirection messages, don't have to worry now. We'll come to that later. Client error response, okay? Let's say your client sends a request body. He's trying to update a book, but the book ID has given is wrong. You would send a 400 bad request. Why is it a 400 bad request? Because whatever the client is trying to, like whatever information the client has sent you is incorrect. So 400 basically means that you're telling the client that, hey, check your request, there's something wrong with it. So you would send a 400 bad request in that, okay? 401 is unauthorized, which means that there is a book by ID 0123, but you are not allowed to view that. In that case, you would send a 401, okay? You can see here that if somebody is authorized to view a book, they would get a 200. But if somebody is not authorized to view a book, they would get a 401, okay? Because that is unauthorized. Payment required, don't worry about that. Forbidden, okay? What is forbidden? Forbidden means that you are authorized to access a particular, so for example, let's think about this. There are, imagine a library, okay? In a library, you have sections for children and you have section for adults. Okay. And then let's say adults has some shit that you don't want the kids to see. Okay. So the kids are allowed to see everything. Like when the kids say that show me all the books, they can see all of them. I mean, they can see majority of the books. But if a curious kid tries to access the section that they're not allowed to see, then they're going to get a 403. 403 is different from 401. 401 says that you're not authorized to see it. That means you cannot even see the content. You cannot even come into the library. 401 is like you cannot come into the library. 403 means you can walk into the library, but you cannot go to this particular section. Okay, that is the 403 forbidden. Okay, 404 it's straight not found. You're looking for a particular book, you go to the shelf, you don't see that book, you're going to return a 404. Okay, 405 means methods not allowed. What does it mean? If you are trying to create a resource, instead of sending a post request, you send a get request. The response that the server will send you is method not allowed, which means on this particular API, you cannot call this particular method, whatever it is. Okay, that's this. You try to change something. Okay, you try to, I told you, right? You can either accept something, for example, here in this, where is it? If somebody is trying to do an updation, you can say 202, which means that updation is complete. I have accepted your update. But if you cannot allow an update, you would send a 406. Okay? A 408 is request timeout. Let's say a request is taking longer than 10 seconds, then you would eliminate that request and send a 408. 409 is conflict. When you are trying to add a new book, but the book has already been added there, you will basically send a 409 conflict, meaning that duplicate book already exists. Okay, that's basically these things, and there are many, but for now just remember these things that I told you. And like, it's not like you have to remember them by heart. As we start developing Spring application, we'll talk about these things. Okay, so for now what I'll do is I'll create the mock APIs here. So if somebody wants to send the a book in this thing, in this particular path, they're going to basically like they can send a book request. I'm going to tell them that, hey, the content type that I am sending you, the content type that the server is sending back to the client is going to be of application JSON, and I accept. This is how you write basically headers. Okay, headers are written in a key value pair, and header, this response header itself is a JSON. Okay, and I accept application JSON. Okay, response, you can create a mock response here. You can say right, ID, just give a hard code is 123 ID, and then I'm not going to give a lot of details here. I'll just say status success. Okay, all right, that's all I'm going to give. Okay, and I'll save this rule, and so now I have someone who can put this, make a post request to this. Okay, now let's say somebody wants to read. So what was my requirement? My requirement was add a new book, update an existing book. Okay, update means it's a put request. Okay, so we'll do partial update and as well as this thing. So in a put request, we'll say books. Okay, and then here your request can come as 1 2 3 and or 2 3 4, right? So in this case, what you're going to do is you won't say request path exactly matches, you will say request path starts with. Okay, so if your request path starts with this particular thing, then you basically, like, you ignore whatever comes after this and then you access it. So for our use case, we'll think that anything that comes after this is basically any put call that comes to books, and then there is something else after this, right? That will be an updation. Okay, so something like this. What I'll do here is, if you're trying to update it, I'll send a 206. Okay, and I'll send the same thing here. accept application JSON. Okay, and here I'll say 0, 1, 2, 3, and status would be updated. Okay, done. Yep, that creates a rule. Let's say I want to do a partial update also. So I'll say a patch option, request path starts with books. Okay. Let's say I won't allow partial updates. Okay, so what I'm going to send is 406. 406 is the not allowed, right? 06, not acceptable. Huh? So I will not accept partial update. So I'll send a 406 there. Similarly, I'll say sorry, accept, not accepted. Application JSON, all right, and I'll send a proper message saying not accepted. Okay, save route. For now, I've just created these things. What was the other thing? The other thing was delete a book. So create a new rule. Do a delete request. Request path starts with I think, yeah, this. If your deletion is done, you would send a 200. Okay, so again the same thing. Sorry, accept. Okay, application JSON. Okay, this is how you would send, and in the status you would just say deleted successfully. Okay, that's it. These are the 4 mock APIs I created. So let's actually go ahead and test these APIs with something called Postman. Okay, you guys need to have Postman installed there. I already have a Postman installed here, so I'll open this Postman. Okay, so let me show you how Postman works. I'll get rid of this. I'll get rid of this. Don't save. Don't save. Don't save. Don't save. Don't save. Okay, so you will click on this plus button here, which will open this request panel for you. Okay, now what do you have here? Give me 1 second now. One second. Yeah, okay. So what is the first rule here? The first rule is that I'm going to make a post request to my books API. Okay, so here you can see that you will see all the HTTP methods that are available. We'll do a post call. Okay, what is the request URL? First, I would have to copy the base URL. Okay, so I think you can go to this thing and you can just say copy, click to copy path. Okay, if you click on this, come here and paste it, it just gives you the path, which means I need the base URL. The base URL is basically this. Okay, so it will be base URL / books. All right, this is a post request. Now, how do I add headers to it? You have this headers part here, right? In the header, these are the this is something what Postman sends with every request. Okay, so these are already predefined. I'm going to add my own, I'm going to add whatever else I when you read my request, read it as a JSON object. Okay. Then what happens is I'll go ahead in the body section, and here you can see none, form data, XML, raw, and all those things. You will basically pick the raw part. Okay. You click raw and you start adding your body. Okay. So what is it that I want? I'm trying to add a book. So I'll say name. I'll give book 1. I think I can increase this font. Can I not? How do I increase this? Okay. Name would be book 1. Okay. Then let's say author. Okay. Published on is, let's say, 22 11 2021. Okay, this is it. And category, let's say science. Okay, so this is a book creation API, and I'm basically, this is how my request body looks. When I click on send, you can see this, that I got a response from my server. Where is the server running? Server is running on this particular part. Okay, so it says ID is 00123. This is a hard-coded value, but it is just emulating a server response for you. It is a hard-coded value which says that this is your ID and this is the status of this request is a successful. And you can see here, I'm getting a 201 created. Okay, and you can also see in the headers, this is the headers that comes from the server itself. We have defined 2 headers ourselves. One is the content type, which is application JSON, and one is the accept, which is application JSON. If I go back here and let's say I edit this particular rule here. Okay, okay, how do I edit this? 5 request. 1 second. Mocking rules. If I edit this thing and I change this to not application JSON, but actually everything. Okay, if I change it and then I save this rule, okay, and then I hit this API again, you will see that I get the same request body, but in the headers you'll see accept is now star. Okay, this is how the headers communicate. I mean, this is how you can pass headers and all that. Okay, that's the creation part of a book. The next API is basically updating a book. So I'll basically do a put request here. I'll send the same thing. Okay, this time I'll have to give the ID. I'll give the ID as 00123 book 1. And then if I do this, okay, so this great. Okay, I'm not going to be allowed to hit more than these many things. Let me just go here. Save rule. Okay, look at this. All right, so this was a I sent a 206 means partial content. What was the request? Why am I sending a mocking rules put input? What am I saying? I'm sending 206. Why 206? 206 stands for 206. 206 stands for what? Partial content. Nope, that's not what I want, right? I want a accepted. So what is the value for accepted? Value for accepted, I think, is 201 is created. Let me go back to this thing again. Successful response 201. Okay, created 202. So I should send a 202 from my server. Okay, so I'll say 202 this thing. Okay, save the rule here. For patch, I told you that I don't want any partial update, so here I'm sending 40406, and basically I'll just remove this save rule. Okay, if I send the request now, you'll see that I'll get this updated response from my server, and it says 202. 202 means it's accepted. You can check the headers here. These are the headers that I'm getting from the server, and these are the headers that I'm sending to my server. Okay. If I change this method to patch, okay, and then send a request, you will see 406 not accepted. Okay, which means partial. This thing is not accepted. And you can immediately see here in this that it is a 406. All right. It's in red. That means it's not accepted. Similarly, we have, I think, one more rule here, which is delete. Okay, so if I place a delete call here, let's say, so delete usually doesn't have any body. So I'll do this for body. I'll change this to none here. Okay. And in this, I'll just specify the ID 00123. Okay. When I do this, it will say deleted successfully and it gives a 200 status. Okay, so go through this, go through the concept that I taught you. Get yourself familiar with the Bceptor platform. It will just take like hardly few minutes. Idea is that you create these mock APIs. When you create the mock APIs, you will know what to name, how to name. There's an assignment for this. And then whenever you create APIs like this, you start testing your APIs using Postman. Okay, that's all. If you have any questions, let me know. Cool. If you don't have any questions, you guys can leave. And Ashish, I think you said that you would stay back, right? Oh, you can stay back. Everyone else can leave. Yeah. Share the screen. Huh. Let's check the Java version. The command is wrong, man. उसको Java, हाँ Java वैसे नहीं होगा. Could not find main class, load main class version. अच्छा ये कहाँ से आया? ये तो तुम्हारा, इसका मतलब तो Java accept हो गया ना? ये error जब आ रहे हैं.
Yes, sir.
हाँ, टर्मिनल में जाओ वापस, मतलब में जाओ.
हाँ
जावा का J स्मॉल होगा.
Chapter में
जावा का J स्मॉल होगा. J स्मॉल होगा भाई. J स्मॉल होगा. हाँ, अब करो. हाइफन वर्जन. ये बोल रहे जावा इज नॉट रिकॉग्नाइज्ड एज एन इंटरनल और एक्सटर्नल कमांड ऑपरेबल एज अ बैच फाइल. ये तुम्हारा बिन देने के बाद भी ना.
हाँ तो सर ये कैपिटल में
ये तुम्हारा बिन के बाद भी वैसा हो रहा है ना.
नहीं बिन नहीं किया
तो बिन करो एक बार बिन में चेंज करो. मतलब उसके पीछे एक बार बस बिन ऐड कर दो. दैट्स इट. ऐसा होना नहीं चाहिए. विदाउट बिन ही चलना चाहिए. पता नहीं ऐसा क्यों हो रहा है. ना वो वैसा नहीं. जैसा दिया हुआ है वो स्लैश तुम गलत दे रहे हो. बैकवर्ड स्लैश दो. हाँ ठीक है. सेम उसमें भी करो. ठीक है. ओके ठीक है. अब वो कमांड प्रॉम्प्ट को फिर से रन करो, मतलब उसको क्लोज कर दो, एग्जिट मार दो, फिर से चलाओ। हाँ ठीक है, रिकॉग्नाइज हुआ।
Yes,
अब
sir.
तुमको अब तुम मेवन वाला वो रन करो तो उस
ये नहीं काम
प्रोजेक्ट में जाओ। नहीं नहीं, उस प्रोजेक्ट में जाओ, कमांड प्रॉम्प्ट में उस प्रोजेक्ट का डायरेक्टरी में जाओ। प्रोजेक्ट का डायरेक्टरी कहाँ है? डेमो 2, हाँ ये वाला पाथ पूरा कॉपी करो। उसमें सीधी पे वो पाथ कॉपी करके पेस्ट करो।
स्मॉल में सर।
हाँ हाँ, सब स्मॉल में होगा। एंटर। अब उसमें वो लिखो mavenw.cmd, mvnw.cmd
CMD ना सर।
हाँ, फिर क्लीन इंस्टॉल cmdd स्पेस। अच्छा, अभी भी बोल रहे कि जावा होम not found in your environment variable, please set java home variable in your environment to match। ठीक है, एक मिनट रुक जाओ, अभी फिक्स कर देते हैं इसको। विंडोज में जावा होम to set java home in windows 10, हमने बस पाथ सेट किया, जावा होम वेरिएबल हमने सेट ही नहीं किया। ठीक है, इसमें हम लोग क्या करते हैं, व्यू एडवांस्ड एनवायरनमेंट वेरिएबल्स। अच्छा ठीक है, ओके भाई। एक काम करो, फिर से तुम अपना उस दिस पीसी के ऊपर राइट क्लिक करो करके वो एनवायरनमेंट वेरिएबल्स देखो, तुम्हारे यहाँ पे खुला हुआ है दिस पीसी, लेफ्ट में दिखा रहे हैं। हाँ हाँ हाँ, वही पे वही, अरे बंद कर दिया तुमने वो। ठीक है, फिर से खोलो वो। हाँ फिर से वही खोलो। ये सेशन में रिकॉर्ड करना बंद कर देता हूँ। Do you want to stop cloud